Cool. Should we do a little bit of a warm up? All right, this is going to be sweet, short and sweet. Well, I say that all the time, but here we go. So, if you care to, with me, just with the intention of just bringing our energy to where we are right now, just take note at your own pace of the breaths you are receiving. The inhales and the exhales will just be quiet for a few moments so we can just focus on the breath, thereby focus on the body, thereby bring us into the present moment, perhaps just a little bit more than we just were. Few breaths in and out with me at your own pace. Not judging ourselves for how we're breathing. Noticing that we have a body, perhaps. Maybe a little gratitude, expression. And I'll also invite you from here to just set an intention for yourself for the time that we'll spend here together this evening. All right, so on tap for our warm-up this evening are two subjects that often go hand in hand called anxiety and depression. Anxiety and depression. So what we're going to do in this brief warm-up is what we often do in spiritual workout world, where we're talking generally, and we are not talking in this particular case about clinical anxiety or depression, the kind that becomes so debilitating for a person that they're likely under psychiatric care, likely on medication. That's not what we're talking about. What we're talking about today, right now, is the quote unquote everyday or garden variety use of the term anxiety and use of the term depression. Why? Because anxiety and depression are two of the things that most people report as issues in their lives. And most people report them as both as issues in their lives. Yet when a being comes to spiritual workout world and may be looking for ways to manage their depression or to manage their anxiety, they quickly learn that what we do here in our perspective here is not about managing our anxiety, but it's about eliminating anxiety from our everyday lives, or at least moving away from it being a chronic condition whereby we're humming through life. We typically don't experience any anxiety. Then something quote unquote big is going on. Our anxiety kind of perks up a little bit and then it recedes again. And the same on the depression side of what we're talking about. We're talking about not learning to manage our depression, but learning to eliminate it. And it's what I'm talking about here is based on the idea that neither of these conditions, neither what we call anxiety or what we call depression, are conditions, if you will, that are rained down upon us, that we're just either lucky or unlucky to or unlucky, let's say, to have to deal with or contend with it. Rather, anxiety and depression, as we're talking about them here, are functions simply of how we think. Now, you've probably heard it said before, maybe here, maybe in other places, that for all intents and purposes, when we are feeling anxious, and particularly when anxiety is chronic for us, we are thinking the future in the present. Almost every thought that we have that we would call anxiety is based on a sentence that starts with what if? What if this happens? What if that happens? What if this happens? What if that happens? What if this happens? What if that happens? So, from a spiritual workout perspective, we know that right off the bat, we are in violation, quote unquote, of one of our concepts, which is about being present. So ultimately, what somebody who comes to spiritual workout with anxiety will learn is to simply become more and more present. There's nothing wrong with feeling anxiety, but if anxiety becomes such a powerful component of one's life, whereby they are spending most of their time thinking about possibilities that may or may not ever happen in the future, then that's the kind of thing that is just a matter of not being present. So the first thing we're going to do here in spiritual workout world, not to manage anxiety, but to eliminate it, is to just simply practice becoming more and more and more present. You know, we didn't make up that idea to be present. It's sort of been around for quite some time. We just aren't so good at practicing it. So, and when we're not, it produces anxiety. Another component of this is fundamentally, well, what am I believing? Right? So I'm thinking about the future. What if this happens? What if this happens? What if this happens? But why am I so conditioned to think that way? Why am I so inclined? Why is it so easy? Why am I so willing to entertain thought after thought after thought? Well, beliefs matter. Beliefs create experience. So somewhere underneath there, for a person who contends with chronic anxiety, will be a belief or a set of beliefs that have something to do with, I'm not okay. I'm not okay. So again, this is where I, Stephen, am now the spiritual workout guy and not a psychotherapist, because that is a place where it sort of hits the end of the road, right? I'm not okay. Well, okay, then let's give you all these ways to manage not being okay. But that's just a belief that exists in 3D. As spiritual beings having human experiences, as souls in bodies, we know that we're always okay, that nothing bad can ever happen to us, no matter how bad it looks through a 3D lens. So being more present and looking at specific beliefs that create the anxiety can all add up to eliminating anxiety from one's life. And without going into so much detail, because it's the same basic concept, the same thing is true for depression, where we tend more often than not, when we're feeling depressed, to be living in the past. I should have done this. I could have done that. I'm a bad person because A, B, C, X, Y, Z. So we also are not being present because we're living in the past. We're relitigating the past over and over and over again, which makes us feel depressed. Of course it does. It's depressing because there's nothing that anybody can ever do about any of that. And then also we would look at beliefs. So wrapped up in the belief system of somebody who experiences chronic depression, not clinical, but chronic everyday garden variety depression like we experience and talk about, is somebody who's going to be steeped in a set of beliefs about themselves, about not being good enough, not being anything enough, or being something of a bad person, or just some sort of, I would say, self-judgment. I'm not saying that's the only thing that can be in that the belief system of such a person, but it is largely, it's at least a big part of it. So when we're thinking about anxiety and depression the way we're doing here, one comes to spiritual workout world not to learn ways to manage these conditions, but to see very clearly where they come from. They're just thoughts, and how to change the thoughts and thereby eliminate the conditions. So, if you would, nice deep breath with me out of this warm up. Holding on to the good bits, letting go of whatever you don't need or want. And let's come back and talk about what you want to talk